In a striking statement, Secretary of State Marco Rubio indicated on Sunday that the possibility of a temporary ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia remains a viable option, despite the consensus among U.S., Ukrainian, and Russian leaders that a comprehensive peace agreement is the ultimate goal to conclude the ongoing conflict. Rubio articulated this perspective during an appearance on NBC News' Meet the Press, asserting, "It was agreed to by all that the best way to end this conflict is through a full peace deal. There's no doubt about that. I mean, who would be against the fact that tomorrow we came to you and said, we have a full peace deal and it's done? I think that's the best way to end the war." This statement underscores the universal desire for a resolution, yet he acknowledged the complexities involved in reaching that point. He elaborated, "Now, whether there needs to be a ceasefire on the way there, well, we've advocated for that. Unfortunately, the Russians as of now have not agreed to that. This highlights a significant hurdle in the peace process as the lack of agreement on a ceasefire complicates negotiations." Rubio's remarks followed a recent meeting between President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska, where discussions took place without the presence of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy or any Ukrainian representatives. Despite this absence, U.S. officials remain optimistic about persuading Putin to consider a ceasefire or a peace agreement. However, Trump later remarked, "There's no deal until there's a deal," indicating the uncertainty that still looms over the negotiations. During the interview, Rubio placed the onus on Putin for the lack of progress towards a ceasefire, particularly in light of Russia's ongoing military actions in Ukraine. He stated, "We think usually it's very hard to negotiate when you're in the middle of hostilities. But that said, the only way to have a ceasefire is for both sides to agree to stop firing at one another. And the Russians just haven't agreed to that." This statement raises an important question. How can meaningful negotiations occur when one party is unwilling to halt aggression? Zelenskyy is scheduled to visit the White House on Monday to engage with Trump and other European leaders, including Finland's President Alexander Stubb, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. In a joint press conference with von der Leyen in Brussels, Zelenskyy stressed the critical need for a ceasefire to facilitate ongoing peace negotiations. He remarked, "Putin has many demands, but we do not know all of them. And if there are really as many as we have heard about, then it will take a lot of time to go through all of them. And it is impossible to do this under the pressure of weapons. So it is necessary to stop the fire and work quickly on a final agreement. We will talk about this in Washington. Putin does not want to stop the killings, but he must do it." Rubio also addressed the Trump administration's choice not to impose additional sanctions on Russia, despite Putin's reluctance to engage in peace talks. He stated, "What we're trying to do right now is end the war. If we're not going to be able to reach an agreement here at any point, then there are going to be consequences, not only the consequences of the war continuing, but the consequences of all those sanctions continuing, and potentially new sanctions on top of it as well. But what we're trying to do right now is end the war." This raises a provocative point. Can sanctions truly compel a nation to negotiate, or do they merely entrench positions further? Rubio expressed skepticism about the effectiveness of new sanctions, noting, "I don't think new sanctions on Russia are going to force them to accept ceasefire. They're already under very severe sanctions." He further explained that imposing new sanctions could hinder the pursuit of a lasting peace agreement, stating, "The minute he takes those steps, all talks stop. The minute we take those steps, there is no one left in the world to go talk to the Russians and try to get them to the table to reach a peace agreement. So that moment may come. I hope not, because I hope we get a peace deal." While Rubio refrained from divulging specific details about the ongoing negotiations involving Ukraine, Russia, the U.S., and European allies, he did mention two critical issues that have surfaced in recent discussions: territorial exchanges and security assurances for Ukraine. He emphasized there has to be talk about what the territories are going to look like and what the border lines are going to look like at the end of this conflict. There has to be talk about Ukraine's legitimate desire for security in the long term to make sure they don't get invaded again. There has to be talk about how Ukraine is rebuilt. And how do you rebuild a country that's been attacked as often as it has over the last 3.5 years? These elements are essential for any potential agreement, and Rubio acknowledged, "We understand that. And if there's going to be a deal, each side is going to have to give up on something." He further noted that the current territorial situation poses a significant challenge, stating, "Ultimately, if the Ukrainians are not willing to give that up, and no one's pushing Ukraine to give that up. And so I don't think that's what. There's going to be a peace deal. It's not going to look like that." Rubio pointed out that Putin is likely demanding concessions that Ukraine and its allies are unwilling to accept, while Ukraine is also making requests that Russia is not prepared to fulfill. This dynamic complicates the path to a resolution. Steve Witkoff, the Trump administration's special envoy to the Middle East, elaborated on the discussions regarding territorial boundaries during an appearance on CNN's State of the Union, mentioning that 5 key regions are under consideration in the peace negotiations. He stated, "There are 5 regions here that it's always in our view, been the crux of the deal," although he did not specify which regions beyond Donetsk. Witkoff added that the Russians have made some concessions regarding these regions, and discussions are set to continue when President Zelenskyy arrives with his delegation and other European leaders. Rubio refrained from commenting on the potential role of the United States in providing security guarantees, although Trump has indicated that any peace agreement would not pave the way for Ukraine to join NATO. He acknowledged, "There'll have to be some security guarantees for Ukraine, right? I mean, it's one of their fundamental demands, is that if this war were to end, they have to make sure this never happens again." He further explained, in order for there to be a peace, the Russian side is going to have to accept that Ukraine is a sovereign country that has a right to defend itself and has a right to enter into alliances with other countries to defend itself. How that's constructed, what we call it, how it's built, what guarantees are built in there that are enforceable, that's what we'll be talking about over the next few days. Witkoff mentioned on Fox News Sunday that security guarantees could be modeled after NATO's Article 5, suggesting that the U.S. might be prepared to offer such guarantees directly, rather than through NATO, in collaboration with other European nations. In a contrasting viewpoint, Senator Chris Murphy, D-Con, criticized Rubio's statements and the decision to engage with Putin, labeling the meeting a disaster and an embarrassment for the United States. He argued, "Trump said, if I don't get a ceasefire, Putin is going to pay a price." And then he walked out of that meeting saying, "I didn't get a ceasefire, I didn't get a peace deal, and I'm not even considering sanctions." Murphy expressed concern that Rubio was downplaying the significance of sanctions, stating, "What a great day for Russia." This ongoing situation raises critical questions about the effectiveness of diplomatic negotiations and the role of international pressure in achieving peace. What are your thoughts on the potential for a ceasefire? Do you believe sanctions can influence Russia's actions, or do they only serve to escalate tensions? We invite you to share your opinions in the comments.